The rain
We have to
came
go
down like God's
now.
own
I
judgment
can't.
that
It
October
hurts.
night, hammering the neon sign of Maggie's Diner until the
I told you
letters
to
blurred
leave.
into streaks of
I'm not
red
going
and blue
anywhere.
against the
Get out,
darkness.
or I'm calling the
Route
cops.
Go
66
ahead.
stretched empty, in
Here
both
you go.
directions,
Coffee's
a
nice and
black
hot.
ribbon of
Thanks,
asphalt
dear.
glistening
Smells
under the
great.
You're
storm.
welcome.
And
Enjoy.
somewhere in that darkness, thunder rolled like
Whoa,
distant
nice
artillery
save.
fire.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
Inside the diner, the
sorry.
fluorescent
Hey,
lights
watch
hummed their
it.
It was an
tired song.
accident.
The clock on the wall read 11:32, 12 hours. That's how long Rayne Holloway had been on her feet, moving between tables with a smile that had worn thin around the edges hours ago. 32 years old, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had come loose, uniform wrinkled shoes that pinched with every step. But she needed this job. Single alone rent due in 3 days. She wiped down the counter for the third time, her movements automatic practiced. The coffee maker gurgled in the background. Outside, lightning split the sky, and for just a moment, everything went white. That's when she heard the sound of engines. Multiple engines, loud, aggressive, getting closer. Rayne looked up through the rain-streaked window and felt something cold settle in her stomach. 5 motorcycles roared into the parking lot, their headlights cutting through the rain like knives. Young men, mid-20s, leather jackets soaked through dismounting, with the kind of swagger that comes from never being told no. The door burst open and they piled in, bringing the smell of rain and cheap whiskey with them. Dalton Ashford led the pack. 28 years old, blonde hair, slicked back, expensive watch on his wrist that caught the light. Handsome in that entitled way some men have, where good looks have opened every door and excused every transgression. His father was the mayor. His brother was a deputy sheriff. In Redemption, Arizona, that made Dalton untouchable, and he knew it. Well, well, Dalton said, his voice carrying across the empty diner. Place still open, darling. Rayne forced a smile back onto her face. Professional, polite. Kitchen closes at midnight, gentlemen. But I can get you coffee. Coffee? Dalton laughed and his friends laughed with him. Pack animals, Rayne thought. They moved to the largest booth, sliding on and spreading out, taking up space like they owned it. Now we want food. Burgers, fries, the works. I'm sorry, but the cook's already. The cook's still here. I can see him back there. Dalton pointed toward the kitchen window where old Pete was cleaning the grill. So cook, that's what you people do, right? The words hung in the air. You people. Rayne's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. Sir, I can't. Dalton stood up too fast, and suddenly he was close. Too close. Rayne could smell the whiskey on his breath, see the glassy shine in his eyes. Drunk. Very drunk. Did you just tell me can't? One of his friends whistled low. Another pulled out his phone, started recording. Just for laughs, probably. Everything was content these days. Everything was a joke. Please, Rayne said quietly. I don't want any trouble. Then don't make trouble. Dalton's hand shot out, grabbed her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to control. Hard enough to remind her who had the power here. We're customers. The customer's always right. Isn't that what they taught you? Rayne tried to pull back. His grip tightened. Let go. Make me. It happened fast. Rayne yanked her arm back hard and Dalton, drunk and off balance, stumbled. His friends laughed. That made it worse. Nobody laughs at Dalton Ashford. Nobody makes him look stupid. His face went red. You bitch! He grabbed her apron, both hands this time, and pulled. Rayne tried to step back, tried to get away, but her foot caught on the leg of a chair. She went down hard, and there was a sound like fabric tearing loud in the sudden silence. Her skirt. The side seam had ripped clean open from her hip down to mid-thigh. Rayne hit the floor, one hand going instinctively to cover herself, the other catching her fall. Pain shot through her wrist. But worse than the pain was the humiliation, hot and sharp, as she looked up and saw them. Dalton standing over her, hands still clenched. His friends with their phones out, recording, grinning. The cool air on her exposed skin. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Could only lie there on the dirty floor of Maggie's diner while 5 men laughed at her. One of them said something. She didn't hear the words, just the laughter. Outside, through the rain and the thunder, another sound cut through. Different from the sport bikes Dalton and his friends rode. Deeper. Older. The distinctive rumble of a Harley-Davidson. The laughter stopped. A single headlight appeared through the window, bright and steady. The engine cut off, and in the sudden quiet, Rayne could hear her own breathing, ragged and desperate. The door opened. No dramatic entrance. No announcement. Just a man stepping out of the rain into the fluorescent light water, streaming off his leather jacket, his boots making wet prints on the linoleum. Corbin Thorne was 68 years old, but he didn't move like it. 6'2", shoulders still broad under the worn leather, spine straight. His hair was steel gray, cut short, and his beard was the same, neatly trimmed. His face was all hard angles and weathered lines carved by 68 years of living, not all of it easy. A scar ran down his right cheek, 3 inches long, faded white against tan skin. Gulf War 1991, a piece of shrapnel that should have killed him and didn't. His hands were what told the real story. Calloused, scarred knuckles that had been broken and healed crooked more than once. Mechanic's hands. Fighter's hands. Hands that had built things and broken things and learned over many years the difference between the two. On the back of his jacket, mostly hidden by the rain, was a patch. Faded, the edges frayed. Hell's Angels. But someone had taken a knife and cut a neat X through it. Not ripped off, not torn away in anger. Carefully removed. Deliberately. A statement. Corbin stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds, water dripping from his jacket, his eyes moving from Dalton to his friends to Rayne on the floor, taking it all in with the calm that comes from seeing worse things in worse places. Then he moved, not rushed, not aggressive, just walking forward with purpose that made Dalton's friends instinctively step back. He shrugged out of his jacket as he crossed the room, the leather heavy with rain, and draped it over Rayne's shoulders, covering her torn skirt, giving her back some dignity. His voice when he spoke was low and rough like gravel under tires. Go to the back, Rayne. Lock the door. Rayne looked up at him. She'd seen this man come into Maggie's 3-4 times a week for the past 3 years. Always polite, always tipped well, always sat in the same corner booth, drank his coffee, black-read the newspaper. Sometimes they'd talked. Small talk mostly. Weather, news, nothing deep. But she'd learned things anyway. Learned he lived alone. Learned he ran a motorcycle repair shop out on the edge of town. Learned he was kind in a quiet, unassuming way, kindness that doesn't need an audience. She'd never asked about the scar, never asked about the crossed-out patch. Some questions you don't ask. Corbin, she said, her voice shaking, I know what they are. He helped her to her feet, gentle like she was something fragile. His jacket hung heavy on her shoulders, still warm from his body heat. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver Zippo lighter, old and worn smooth, with a single letter engraved on the side. L. He pressed it into her hand, closing her fingers around it. Hold on to this. You'll need it before this is over. Rayne wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his eyes stopped her. They were gray, those eyes, storm cloud gray, and they were calm, terrifyingly calm. She went to the back. Corbin turned to face Dalton Ashford and his friends. 5 of them, all in their 20s, all drunk enough to be stupid, sober enough to be dangerous. They'd spread out without realizing it, flanking him the way pack animals do. Dalton was in front, trying to look tough, trying to look unfazed, failing at both. You're Corbin Thorne, Ironside, right? I've heard of you. Hell's Angels. He pointed at the jacket Corbin had left on Rayne. Heard you used to be somebody. Used to matter. Keyword, old man. Used to. Corbin said nothing, just stood there, hands loose at his sides, waiting. It unnerved them. Silence is a weapon most people don't know how to use. One of Dalton's friends, a kid with a snake tattoo crawling up his neck, tried to fill the quiet. This ain't your business, old-timer. Girl's fine. We were just having some fun. Fun. Corbin's voice was so quiet they had to lean in to hear it. That what you call it? Yeah. Dalton found his courage again, fed by whiskey and his friend's presence. That's what I call it. And I'm calling it done. We're leaving. You're leaving. Everybody goes home happy. He turned to go dismissive, already thinking about the story he'd tell later. Corbin spoke one word. No. Dalton stopped, turned back. What did you say? I said no, you're not leaving. Not until you apologize to that woman. Not until you delete those videos. Not until you understand what you did. The kid with the snake tattoo laughed. Or what old man you gonna make us? Corbin's eyes shifted to him. Just a look, nothing more, but the kid's laughter died in his throat. Kid, Corbin said quietly, I've buried better men than you. Don't make me add you to the list. That's when Dalton's hand went to his waistband. The gun came out fast. A Glock 19, black and ugly in the fluorescent light. Dalton held it low, not quite pointing it, not quite threatening, but the message was clear. My father's the mayor, Dalton said, and now his voice had an edge to it, sharp and mean. My brother's a deputy sheriff. I could shoot you right here, right now, and I'd walk. You know that, right? You know who I am. In the back through the kitchen door, Rayne had her phone out, fingers shaking as she tried to dial 911, but she stopped, watching through the window, transfixed. Because Corbin Thorne wasn't backing down. He was stepping forward. 1 step, 2 steps. closing the distance between himself and a loaded gun with calm that didn't make sense that shouldn't exist. I know exactly who you are, Corbin said. You're a boy playing at being a man. You're a coward hiding behind your daddy's name and your brother's badge. And you're about to learn a lesson your father should have taught you 20 years ago. Dalton's hands shook. Just a little. Just enough. It happened in less than 2 seconds. Corbin's right hand came up fast, striking Dalton's wrist on the inside, forcing the gun offline. His left hand followed, clamping over the slide, preventing it from cycling, even if Dalton pulled the trigger. Then he twisted, leveraging the gun out of Dalton's grip with precision that only comes from training from muscle memory built in places where mistakes mean death. Wait, 1991. Corbin had been a combat engineer defusing explosives, repairing vehicles under fire. They taught him how to fight, how to disarm, how to kill if it came to that. He'd hoped it would never come to that again. The gun came free. Corbin dropped the magazine with his thumb, caught it in his left hand, then racked the slide, ejecting the chambered round. The brass cartridge hit the floor with a tiny ping that sounded loud in the silence. He slid the empty gun across the floor toward the kitchen. It spun twice and came to rest against the baseboard. The magazine he pocketed. "I'll keep this," he said, "to protect you from yourself." Dalton stood there, hands still outstretched, where the gun had been face white with shock and fear and rage. His friends had backed up, no longer laughing, no longer recording, suddenly aware that they'd miscalculated badly. "You're dead," Dalton said, but his voice broke on the words. "You're fucking dead. My brother's a cop. He'll what?" Corbin's voice was still quiet, still calm. "He'll arrest me for defending myself, for stopping you from threatening me with a weapon. There's 5 witnesses here, son, and that security camera." He pointed to the corner of the ceiling where a small dome camera blinked its red light. "Everything's on tape." Dalton's eyes went to the camera, then to his friends, then back to Corbin. That's when he pulled out his phone. "Dad," he said when the call connected. His voice was different now. Younger. Smaller. "Yeah, it's me. I need you. There's this guy, old biker Corbin Thorne. He's at Maggie's diner. He attacked us. Pulled a gun. Yeah, I'm okay, but can you send Sterling, please?" He hung up, looked at Corbin with something like triumph in his eyes. "You're done, old man. My brother's coming. Deputy Sterling Ashford. And when he gets here, you're going to jail." Corbin just nodded slowly, like he'd expected this, like he'd planned for it. "I know Sterling. Good kid, does what he's told, even when what he's told is wrong." 15 minutes passed. Corbin stood by the counter, not moving, not speaking. Dalton and his friends huddled by the door, keeping their distance, occasionally muttering to each other. In the back, Rayne stayed hidden, Corbin's jacket still around her shoulders, the silver Zippo clutched in her hand. She wanted to run out there to tell him to leave to save himself. But something kept her frozen. Maybe it was how he stood so still, so ready, like a man who'd made peace with whatever was coming. When the police cruiser pulled up, lights flashing red and blue against the rain, Corbin closed his eyes for just a moment. A breath. Just one. Then he opened them again, and the calm was back. Deputy Sterling Ashford came through the door with his hand on his service weapon, eyes scanning the room for threats. 33 years old, buzz-cut, clean-shaven uniform, crisp despite the rain. He looked like his brother. Same blonde hair, same sharp features. But where Dalton's eyes were cruel, Sterling's were just empty. Following orders. Doing his job. "Corbin Thorne," Sterling said, and his voice was flat professional. "I need you to put your hands where I can see them." Corbin raised his hands slowly, palms out. "Sterling." "Don't." Sterling's jaw tightened. "Don't make this harder than it is. My brother says you pulled a gun on him, says you attacked him and his friends. That true? No. He's lying." Dalton stepped forward, animated now, playing to his audience. "He came in here, started threatening us, pulled a gun. There's witnesses. There's video." Sterling's eyes went to the security camera. "We'll need that footage." "Of course," Dalton smiled. "It'll show everything." But Sterling wasn't looking at Dalton anymore. He was looking at Corbin, and something complicated moved across his face. Conflict. Doubt. 20 years ago, Sterling Ashford had been 13 years old, riding his bike on Route 66 when the chain broke, and he'd been stranded 5 miles from town in 100-degree heat. Corbin Thorne had stopped, fixed the chain, given the kid water, drove slowly beside him all the way home to make sure he was safe. Sterling had never forgotten that. But his brother was his brother, and his father was the mayor. And Corbin was just Corbin, an old biker, a nobody. "I'm sorry," Sterling said, and he meant it. "I have to take you in. Put your hands behind your back." Corbin complied. No resistance, no complaint. Just turned around and let Sterling cuff him, the metal clicking cold around his wrists. You have the right to remain silent. Sterling began reciting the words by rote. Anything you say can and will be used against you. From the back, Rayne finally found her voice. No, he didn't do anything. They attacked me. Dalton ripped my skirt. Corbin was protecting me. Sterling's eyes went to her, saw the torn uniform, the jacket around her shoulders. Something shifted in his expression. Ma'am, are you willing to make a statement? Yes, I'll testify. I'll tell everyone what really. She's lying, Dalton said smoothly. She's his friend. She comes here all the time. She's covering for him. That's not... We'll sort it all out at the station, Sterling said, but his voice was weaker now, less certain. He guided Corbin toward the door, one hand on his elbow. Come on, Corbin, let's go. At the door, Corbin stopped, turned his head, looking back at Rayne one last time. Don't cry for me, he said quietly. Cry for them. They don't know what's coming. Then he was gone out into the rain, into the back of the police cruiser, head ducked, hands cuffed behind his back. Rayne stood there, Corbin's leather jacket heavy on her shoulders, his silver Zippo in her hand, and watched the taillights disappear into the storm. Behind her, she heard Dalton and his friends laughing, fist-bumping, already spinning the story into something they could brag about later. Already deleting the videos from their phones, every trace of what they'd really done. She looked down at the Zippo. In the fluorescent light, she could see the engraving clearly now. Not just an L, a name, Lenora, and beneath it a date, 2011, 13 years ago. Whatever this lighter meant to Corbin Thorne, it meant enough that he'd carried it every day for 13 years. Meant enough that he'd given it to her, a virtual stranger, in his moment of need. Hold on to this. You'll need it before this is over. Rayne closed her hand around the lighter and made a decision. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Redemption County Jail was a squat concrete building on the east side of town, built in the 70s and not updated much since. Corbin sat in the holding cell, hands uncuffed, now back against the cinder block wall, eyes closed. But he wasn't sleeping. He was remembering. The memories came in flashes, not chronological, not orderly, just fragments of a long life lived hard. 17 years old. Tucson, 1973. His father's Harley leaking oil in the parking lot. The old man dead 6 months, crushed under an engine block. Corbin alone with a broken bike and broken dreams and hands that didn't know yet what they could do. 34 years old. Kuwait, 1990. Sand in everything. Heat like standing inside an oven. The moment the shrapnel hit his face, and he knew, absolutely knew, he was going to die right there in the desert. The medic with shaking hands stitching him up while mortars fell. You're lucky. You're lucky. You're lucky. 36 years old. The VA hospital, 1992. Lenora with her dark hair going gray and laugh lines around her eyes, asking him if he was okay. Really okay, and nobody had ever asked him that before. Not like she meant it. 55 years old. 2011. Lenora in the hospital bed, wasting away, squeezing his hand with what little strength she had left. Promise me. No more violence. Choose love. Choose kindness. And yesterday, last night, Rayne on the floor, Dalton standing over her. The choice, walk away or step in. Keep the promise or break it. Safety or righteousness. He'd chosen. And he'd pay the price. But sitting in this cell, hands finally still, breath, finally even Corbin realized something. He'd choose the same thing again. Every time. Without hesitation. Because some promises you keep by honoring the spirit, not just the letter. Lenora hadn't asked him to stand by while evil happened. She'd asked him to choose love over violence. And protecting Rayne, that was love. In action. With consequences. Lenora would understand. Corbin opened his eyes. The door to the holding area opened. Sheriff Everett Colburn stepped through. 62 years old, solid build, going soft around the middle, gray hair cut military short. He wore the uniform with casual authority that comes from 30 years on the job. But his eyes, when they met Corbin's, were troubled. Rhett, Corbin said. Corbin. Rhett closed the door behind him, stood there for a moment just looking at his old friend. Hell of a night. Could say that. Rhett pulled up a metal chair, the legs scraping against the concrete floor. He sat down heavy, like weight was on him. Sterling brought you in. Says Dalton claims you pulled a gun. That true? No. Didn't think so. Rhett rubbed his face with both hands. But we got a problem, Corbin. Dalton's the mayor's son. Sterling's his brother. And that security camera at Maggie's, it's convenient broke. Hasn't worked in 3 months. Corbin felt something cold settle in his chest. Convenient. Yeah. Rhett leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Look, you and me, we go back 40 years. We rode together, bled together. When I was trying to get clean, trying to get straight, you were there. You helped me get this job. I owe you. But, Corbin said, but the Ashford family runs this town. Garrett's been mayor for 30 years. He's got connections, he's got money, and he's got a long memory. Rhett's voice dropped lower. He's wanted your land for 5 years, Corbin. Ever since he found out about the old Prohibition tunnel running under your property. Corbin's eyes sharpened. The tunnel. Yeah. Rhett glanced at the door, making sure they were still alone. He's been running drugs through it, from Mexico up through the tunnels out into the desert. I haven't been able to prove it, but I know. And so do you. Corbin had suspected. The late-night trucks, the lights in places where there shouldn't be lights. But he'd kept his head down, minded his business. 5 years, Rhett continued. Garrett's been trying to buy you out, offering you money, pressuring you, making your life difficult. But you wouldn't sell. It's my land. I know, and that's the problem. Rhett stood up, paced to the bar's back again. Garrett sees an opportunity here. His son got humiliated. You made him look weak. And now Garrett can kill 2 birds. Gets revenge for his boy, gets your land when you're in prison. I didn't do anything wrong. I know that. You know that. But Dalton's going to testify that you did. His 4 friends are going to back him up. And without that security footage, Rhett trailed off. The implication hung in the air. Corbin was quiet for a long moment. When's the preliminary hearing? 36 hours, Judge Quentin Merrick presiding. Rhett sat back down, leaned in close. Corbin, I'll do what I can. I'll testify on your behalf. I'll tell them what I know about you. But Merrick, he's a by-the-book guy. If there's no evidence, if it's your word against 5 witnesses, I understand. Do you, Rhett's voice was urgent now, you're looking at 10 years, Corbin, armed assault, threatening a public official's family. They're going to throw everything at you, and at your age, he didn't finish, didn't need to. 10 years. Corbin would be 78 when he got out, if he got out. There's one more thing, Corbin said quietly. Make a call for me. Who cared them? Cade Brixton. Rhett's eyes widened. Warhammer, Corbin, I know what he is. Call him. Tell him Ironside needs the Brotherhood. One last time. Rhett stood there torn. Cade Brixton was Hell's Angels old school, still active. Calling him meant bringing the club back into Corbin's life. Meant risking everything Corbin had built in the last 13 years. But Rhett had known Corbin long enough to recognize that tone. The quiet certainty. The calm before the storm. Okay, Rhett said finally. I'll make the call. But Corbin, what are you planning? Corbin smiled. Just a small smile, barely there. I'm planning on justice, Rhett. Real justice. Not the kind that wears a black robe. The kind that looks you in the eye and tells the truth. That's what I'm afraid of. Rhett left the door clanging shut behind him. Corbin was alone again. He lay back on the thin mattress, hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling. 36 hours. Outside, the rain had stopped. Through the high window of the cell, Corbin could see a sliver of sky. The storm was moving on. Dawn was coming. Hold on, Lenore, he thought. I'm keeping my promise. I'm doing this right. But he allowed himself one small amendment to that promise. I'm doing this right. But I'm not doing it alone. Somewhere out in the desert, a phone rang. Cade Brixton answered on the second ring, listened to Rhett Colburn's message and spoke 2 words. I'm coming. Then he started making calls of his own. The wheels were in motion now, the pieces moving into position. The Brotherhood, scattered across 3 states, started their engines. 36 hours until the hearing. It would be enough. It had to be. Rayne didn't go home that night. She sat in Maggie's diner until 3 in the morning. Corbin's jacket still around her shoulders, the silver Zippo on the table in front of her. Pete had gone home hours ago. The place was empty except for her and the ghosts of what had happened. Her hands had finally stopped shaking. She'd given her statement to Sterling, told him everything. But she'd seen his eyes, how they'd slid away from hers, how he'd written things down without really listening. His brother had already poisoned the well. The video files were gone. Dalton and his friends had deleted them before the police even arrived. And the security camera was broken, had been broken conveniently for months. It was their word against Corbin's. 5 against 1. Rayne picked up the Zippo, turned it over in her hands. The engraving caught the light. Lenora, 2011. She flicked it open, struck the wheel with her thumb. A flame sprang to life, bright and steady. She watched it dance for a moment, then closed the lighter with a soft click. Who was Lenora wife probably? Dead 13 years if the date meant what Rayne thought it meant. Corbin had carried this for 13 years, through everything, every day. A reminder, a promise, and he'd given it to her. You'll need it before this is over. Rayne made a decision. She pulled out her phone, did a search. Quentin Merrick, Redemption, Arizona. Found an address, a phone number. It was 3 in the morning. She didn't care. She called. It rang 4 times. 5. Then a voice rough with sleep and age. Who is this? Judge Merrick. My name is Rayne Holloway. I work at Maggie's Diner. I need to talk to you about what happened tonight. About Corbin Thorne. A pause. Ms. Holloway, it's 3 in the morning. This is highly inappropriate. I'm presiding over Mr. Thorne's case. I can't speak to witnesses outside of, you were there. Silence. I saw you, Rayne continued, her voice steady now. In the corner booth, you were there when it happened. You saw everything. More silence, then quietly, how did you know? I checked the receipts. Table 7, 1 coffee black. Paid in cash. But I remember you. I've seen you in here before. Always table 7, always coffee. That doesn't mean you saw what they did to me. You saw Dalton pull that gun. You saw Corbin defend himself. Rayne's voice cracked just a little. Please, he's a good man. He helped me. And now he's going to prison for it unless someone tells the truth. The silence stretched out so long, Rayne thought Merrick had hung up. Then I can't discuss this over the phone, but Ms. Holloway, come to my office tomorrow. 9 a.m. We'll talk. Thank you. Thank you so. The line went dead. Rayne sat there, phone in one hand, Zippo in the other, and allowed herself to hope. Just a little. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over Route 66. The rain had washed everything clean, leaving the world fresh and new. But Rayne knew better. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. The sun came up over Redemption like a promise or a threat depending on which side of the bars you were standing on. Corbin watched it through the high window of his cell, a rectangle of orange light creeping across the concrete floor, and thought about time. 34 hours until the hearing. He'd learned patience in the war. Learned to wait in the desert heat while the EOD teams swept for mines, while the intelligence reports filtered down, while the world held its breath between one moment and the next. Patience was a survival skill. Rush and you die. Wait and you might live. So he waited, but he wasn't idle. At 7 a.m. a guard brought breakfast, powdered eggs, burnt toast, coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through an old boot. Corbin ate it all methodically, fuel for the body. The guard was young, maybe 25, nervous. New. Hey, Corbin said as the guard collected the tray. You got a phone I could use. Inmates get 1 call during processing. You already had yours. That was to my lawyer. I need to make another. Can't do it, man. Rules. Corbin nodded, understanding. Then he looked the guard straight in the eye. What's your name, son? Brennan. Brennan Locke. Brennan, you from around here, born and raised. Then you know the Ashfords. You know what kind of family they are. Brennan's eyes shifted. I mean, the mayor's been good for the town. Has he? Corbin leaned back against the wall. How's the water situation? Still got lead in the pipes on the south side. Still got that pothole on 5th Street that's been there for 3 years. Still got a police force that looks the other way when the right people break the rules. Brennan said nothing, but his jaw tightened. I'm not asking you to break any rules, Corbin said quietly. I'm asking you to think about what side of history you want to be on. There's a woman out there, Rayne Holloway, who got assaulted last night, and I'm in here for trying to help her. Does that seem right to you? Brennan stared at the floor for a long moment. Then I'll see what I can do. He left. Corbin waited. 20 minutes later, Brennan came back with a cell phone. 5 minutes. That's all I can give you. And if anyone asks, you stole this. Fair enough. Corbin took the phone. Thank you. Brennan left, closing the cell door, but not locking it. A small mercy. Corbin dialed a number he knew by heart. It rang twice. Ironside Forge and Customs, you've reached the machine. Leave a message. His own voice recorded years ago. The shop was closed. Nobody there to answer. But Corbin wasn't calling the shop. He hung up, dialed another number. This one rang longer. 7 times, 8. Then a click. Yeah, a woman's voice, sleepy, irritated. Rayne, it's Corbin. A pause, then the sleep was gone from her voice, replaced by urgency. Corbin, oh my God, are you okay? Where are you calling from? I'm fine. I don't have much time. I need you to do something for me. Anything. Go to my shop. You know where it is. Off Route 66 past the old grain elevator. That's the one. There's a key hidden under a rock by the front door, left side painted red. Inside in my office, there's a desk, bottom drawer left side. There's a cassette tape in there, old style, the kind nobody uses anymore. You'll know it when you see it. A cassette tape. Okay, what's on it? Corbin was quiet for a moment. My wife, Lenora. She made it before she died. I want you to have it. Keep it safe. If things go bad at the hearing, well, you'll know what to do with it. Corbin, I talked to Judge Merrick. I'm seeing him at 9. He was there. He saw everything. He might testify. Corbin closed his eyes. Quentin Merrick. He knew the name, knew the man by reputation. Honest? By the book. But honest men could still be constrained by the system, by conflict of interest, by the rules that said a judge couldn't testify in his own courtroom. That's good, Corbin said. That's real good, Rayne. But get that tape anyway. Insurance. I will, I promise. And Rayne, thank you for everything. You don't have to thank me. You saved me last night. Nope, no, Corbin said quietly. I just reminded you that you're worth saving. You did the rest yourself. He hung up before she could respond, slipped the phone through the bars, and waited for Brennan to come collect it. Outside, the day was warming up. By noon, it would be 90 degrees, the Arizona sun beating down merciless and clean. Corbin lay back on the bunk and closed his eyes again. Not sleeping. Planning. 33 hours. Rayne stood in front of Judge Quentin Merrick's office. At 8:55 a.m., Corbin's leather jacket folded over her arm, the silver Zippo in her pocket, and her heart hammering against her ribs. The office was on the second floor of the county courthouse, a beige building that had probably been modern in 1975 and hadn't been updated since. The hallway smelled like floor wax and old paper. Her footsteps echoed on the linoleum. At exactly 9 a.m., the door opened. Judge Quentin Merrick was 72 years old, and he looked every day of it. Tall but stooped now, spine curved by time and gravity. His hair was white, combed straight back from a high forehead. His face was all sharp angles and deep lines, the kind of face that had seen things and decided not to forget them. He wore a cardigan over a button-down shirt. No tie, not in session, just a man. Ms. Holloway, he said. His voice was formal, careful. Please come in. The office was small, cramped with books. Law volumes lined every wall, floor to ceiling. A desk dominated the space covered in papers, files, a brass lamp with a green glass shade. On the corner of the desk, a single photograph in a silver frame. Rayne's eyes went to it as she sat down. A woman, maybe 50, dark hair, kind eyes smiling at the camera. Merrick noticed her looking. My wife, Constance. She passed 15 years ago. I'm sorry. So am I. He settled into his chair with a soft grunt, arthritis in his knees. You said on the phone that you knew I was present last night at Maggie's diner. Yes, sir. And you want me to testify to what I saw? Yes, sir. Merrick folded his hands on the desk. Ms. Holloway, I appreciate your position, but I'm the presiding judge in Mr. Thorne's case. If I were to testify, it would create an immediate conflict of interest. The case would have to be reassigned. It would delay proceedings. And frankly, it would give the defense grounds for appeal regardless of the outcome. Rayne felt hope draining away. So you can't help. I didn't say that. Merrick's eyes, pea blue, behind wire-rimmed glasses, met hers. I said there are complications. But Ms. Holloway, I want you to understand something. I've been a judge in this county for 32 years. I've seen a lot of injustice. Too much of it I've let slide because I told myself it wasn't my place to intervene outside the courtroom. I told myself the system would work, that truth would prevail. He reached out, touched the photograph of his wife with one finger. My wife, Constance, was killed by her first husband before she met me. Domestic violence that escalated to murder. She survived barely. Left him, rebuilt her life. We met 5 years later, married, had 20 good years together before cancer took her. Rayne didn't know what to say. The man who hurt her, Merrick continued, he was the son of a county commissioner. He got 3 years, served 18 months. The system protected him because of who his father was. And I watched that happen, and I did nothing because I wasn't the judge on that case and it wasn't my place to intervene. His hand fell away from the photograph. I swore then that I would never let that happen again. That if I ever had the power to stop injustice, I would use it, regardless of the consequences. He looked at Rayne. Last night I watched Dalton Ashford assault you. I watched him pull a gun on a man who was trying to help you. I watched his friends record it and laugh. And I sat there in my corner booth and I did nothing. You couldn't have known. I knew. His voice was hard now. I knew exactly who Dalton was. I've had him in my courtroom twice before. DU. I dismissed because of insufficient evidence. Assault dismissed because the victim suddenly refused to testify. I knew what kind of man he was, what kind of family he came from, and I still did nothing. Rayne leaned forward. Then help now, please. Merrick was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened a drawer in his desk, pulled out a legal pad, and started writing. I can't testify in my own courtroom, he said as he wrote, but I can recuse myself from the case. Declare a conflict of interest. Force the court to assign a new judge. And before I do that, I can make a statement, an affidavit, detailing exactly what I witnessed. Will that work? I don't know. It's irregular. The prosecution will fight it. Garrett Ashford has enough influence to cause problems, but it's a start. He finished writing, signed the bottom with a flourish. I'm also going to do something else, something I should have done years ago. He picked up his phone, dialed a number. Yes, this is Judge Quentin Merrick. I need to speak with the regional office of the FBI, Organized Crime Division. I have information regarding drug trafficking operations in Redemption County. Yes, I'll hold. Rayne's eyes widened. The FBI. Garrett Ashford has been running this town like his personal fiefdom for 30 years. If there's drug trafficking happening, and I believe there is, then it's a federal matter. Local law enforcement can't be trusted to investigate their own mayor. He waited, phone to his ear. Then, yes, hello, my name is Quentin Merrick. I'm a county judge in Redemption, Arizona. I'd like to report the suspected criminal activity involving a public official. Rayne sat back, mind racing. This was bigger than she'd thought. Bigger than Corbin, bigger than Dalton, bigger than one assault in a diner. This was 30 years of corruption coming home to roost. Merrick talked for 20 minutes detailing suspicions, patterns, incidents. When he hung up, he looked older, more tired, but also somehow lighter. They're sending someone, he said. It'll take time, might not be before the hearing, but they're coming. In the meantime, Ms. Holloway, I suggest you find every piece of evidence you can. Talk to anyone who was there, because this isn't going to be easy. I understand. Do you? He fixed her with that pale blue stare. The Ashfords will come after you. They'll try to discredit you, frighten you, make you disappear. You need to be ready for that. Rayne thought about the torn skirt, the laughter, the feeling of powerlessness on that diner floor. Then she thought about Corbin, calm and steady stepping between her and danger. I'm ready, she said. Merrick nodded slowly. Then go. Find your evidence. And Ms. Holloway, be careful. The cassette tape was right where Corbin had said it would be. Rayne found the key under the red-painted rock, led herself into Ironside Forge and Customs. The shop smelled like motor oil and metal shavings and something else, something harder to define. History, maybe. Or ghosts. The main floor was a workspace. 2 motorcycles in various states of disassembly tools hung on pegboards, parts organized in bins. Everything clean, everything in its place. A mechanic's space. A craftsman's space. The office was in the back, a small room with a desk, a filing cabinet, a calendar on the wall from 2019 that nobody had bothered to update. Rayne sat in Corbin's chair and pulled open the bottom left drawer. The cassette tape was in a clear plastic case labeled in neat handwriting. Lenora, February 2011. Rayne held it up to the light. Inside, she could see the brown magnetic tape spooled tight. Ancient technology. She didn't even know if she could find a player for it. Then she noticed something else in the drawer. A photograph face down. She picked it up, turned it over. A woman smiled at the camera, maybe 50 years old, dark hair shot through with gray, wearing scrubs, a stethoscope around her neck. Nurse Rayne guessed, and next to her, younger, less gray in the beard, was Corbin, his arm around her shoulders, both of them squinting into the sun. Happy. Rayne felt something catch in her throat. This was what Corbin had lost. This was what he'd been carrying for 13 years. She put the photograph and the tape in her bag, locked up the shop, put the key back under the rock. Then she sat in her car for a long moment thinking. Corbin had said the tape was insurance, that she'd know what to do with it. But to use it, she needed to be able to play it, and she needed people to hear it. She pulled out her phone, made a call. Redemption Electronics. This is Frank. Hi, Frank, this is Rayne. Do you still repair old audio equipment? Depends on how old. Cassette player. A pause. Wow, yeah, I can do that. Might take me a day or two to find parts, though. I need it faster. Today, if possible, I'll pay extra. Must be important. It is. All right, bring it by. I'll see what I can do. Rayne drove to the electronics shop, a cluttered store on Main Street run by a retired engineer who couldn't stand the idea of throwing anything away. She handed over the cassette, explained what she needed. Frank turned it over in his hands, careful like it was something precious. This is old school. Haven't seen one of these in years. Give me 2 hours. I've got a player in the back I can refurb. Thank you. Hey, Rayne. Frank looked at her over his reading glasses. I heard what happened in the last night at Maggie's. I'm sorry. Word traveled fast in a small town. I'm okay. That Thorne guy, he's good people. Fixed my bike, once charged me half what anyone else would have. Hope he gets a fair shake. Me too. Rayne left the shop, got back in her car, and just sat there for a moment. 2 hours. She had 2 hours to kill. She thought about going home, changing, maybe sleeping. She'd been up for 26 hours straight. Her body was screaming at her to rest, but her mind wouldn't let her. Instead, she drove back to Maggie's diner. The day shift was in full swing. The place was packed, people drinking coffee, eating breakfast, talking in low voices. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone had an opinion. Rayne walked in, and the conversations died. Pete was behind the grill, same as always. He looked up, saw her, and something complicated crossed his face. Guilt, maybe. He'd been in the back when it happened, hiding, protecting himself. She couldn't blame him. He was 68 years old, a cook, not a fighter. But she couldn't forgive him either. Rayne, Pete said, you okay? No, but I will be. She looked around the diner. I need to ask everyone something. Anyone who was here last night, anyone who saw what happened, I need them to come forward, to make a statement. Silence. Please, Rayne continued. Corbin's in jail for helping me. If you saw the truth, if you know what really happened, please, tell someone. Tell the police. Tell the judge. Tell anyone who'll listen. More silence. Then a woman in the corner booth stood up. Middle-aged, worn hands waitress uniform from the diner across town. I was here, came in for coffee, on my break. I saw it. Saw that Ashford kid grab you. Saw the old guy step in. Will you testify? The woman hesitated. The Ashfords, they got a lot of power. I know, but Corbin doesn't have any power, just the truth, and he needs people to speak it. The woman thought about it. Then slowly she nodded. Okay, yeah, I'll testify. Thank you. What's your name? Jolene. Jolene Briggs. Rayne wrote it down, one witness. It wasn't much, but it was something. Nobody else came forward. She left Maggie's with a knot in her stomach and hope burning small and fragile in her chest. 300 miles away in a garage outside Las Vegas, Kate Brixton hung up the phone and looked at the dozen men gathered around him. They were all old. Not retirement home old, but the kind of old that comes from living hard. 60, 70, 75, gray beards and weathered skin and eyes that had seen things most people only read about. Hell's Angels. Original chapter. The ones who'd been there when it meant something, before it became a brand, before it became a joke. That was Red Colburn, Kate said. His voice was gravel and whiskey rough from 50 years of cigarettes and desert wind. Sheriff in Redemption says Ironside needs us. A man in the back, 72 years old with a prosthetic leg from a bike crash in '89, spoke up. Ironside left the club 30 years ago. Why should we ride for him? Kate fixed him with a look. Because in 1987, when your bike went down on I-40 and caught fire, who pulled you out? Who got you to a hospital before you bled out? The man was quiet. Corbin Thorne saved half the lives in this room at one point or another, Kate continued. He left the club, yeah, but he left honest. No betrayal, no secrets sold. Just walked away because he wanted to live different. We all knew it was coming. Hell, we respected it. He looked around the garage. Now he's in trouble. Some mayor's kid framed him trying to take his land, and Corbin's facing 10 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. What are we supposed to do? Another man asked. Storm the jail. No, we're not 20 anymore. We can't fight that fight. Cade smiled, slow and dangerous. But we can show up. We can stand there visible and remind that town that Corbin Thorne isn't alone, that he's got brothers, and brothers don't forget. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. We ride at dawn, Cade said. Full colors, full chapter. We show redemption, what loyalty looks like. They started their engines. By midnight, they were gathering at the Nevada-Arizona border. 27 motorcycles, 27 men average, age 68. They looked like they belonged in rocking chairs, not on Harleys. But when they rode like the years fell away, like they were young again, and the road was theirs, and nothing could stop them. Cade led the pack, his bike, a 1985 shovelhead that he'd rebuilt 6 times and would rebuild 6 more if he had to. Behind him rode men with names like Gravedigger and Smokestack and rusty names they'd earned decades ago and never shed. They stopped once at a gas station just inside Arizona to fuel up and stretch legs that didn't bend like they used to. A state trooper pulled in, saw the colors tensed. Cade walked over, hands visible, non-threatening. Evening officer, just passing through. The trooper looked at them. 27 old men in Hell's Angels patches. Where you headed? Redemption. That's Ashford territory. I know. The trooper studied Cade for a long moment. Then surprisingly he nodded. Heard about what happened. With Corbin Thorne. Heard he got a raw deal. You heard right. Well, the trooper tipped his hat. Ride safe, gentlemen, and stay out of trouble. Always do, Cade lied. They rode on through the night, at the desert opening up around them, stars overhead like diamonds spilled across black velvet. The temperature dropped and they pulled on extra layers, but nobody complained. This was what they'd signed up for 40, 50 years ago. Brotherhood, loyalty, the code. They reached redemption at 4 in the morning, just as Rayne was finally falling asleep in her apartment, the cassette tape playing softly in the background, Lenora's voice filling the room with memories of love and loss. The bikes rolled into town silent as they could be, which wasn't very silent, but quiet enough not to wake everyone. They found the courthouse, the jail attached to it, and they parked. 27 motorcycles in a neat row. Then they dismounted, set up camp on the lawn, and waited for the sun. When Corbin woke at dawn, Brennan was at his cell door, eyes wide. You need to see this, the young guard said. He led Corbin to a window that overlooked the front of the building. Below on the courthouse lawn was a camp. Tense, small firesmen moving around with coffee cups and quiet conversation. And motorcycles. Dozens of them all in a line, all perfectly aligned. Corbin saw the colors on the jackets and felt something he hadn't felt in 13 years. Pride. Who are they? Brennan asked. My past, Corbin said quietly, coming to meet my present. Somewhere in that crowd, Cade Brixton looked up, saw Corbin's face in the window, and raised a hand in salute. Corbin raised his hand back. The Brotherhood had come. By 8 a.m., the entire town knew. You couldn't miss 27 Harleys parked in front of the courthouse. You couldn't miss the men in Hell's Angels colors, sitting quiet and patient on the lawn. The police tried to move them. You can't camp here, it's public property. We're not camping, Cade said mildly. We're exercising our First Amendment right to peaceful assembly. You're intimidating people. We're sitting, drinking coffee, breaking no laws. Cade smiled. Unless sitting while old and tattooed is illegal now. The police couldn't do anything. The bikers were right. They weren't breaking any laws. They were just there. Visible. Unavoidable. It made people nervous. It made Garrett Ashford furious. The mayor stood in his office on the 3rd floor of City Hall, looking down at the motorcycle's hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Sterling stood beside him, uncomfortable. Dad, they're not doing anything wrong. They're sending a message that Thorne has backup, that we should be scared. Maybe we should be. Garrett turned on his son, eyes blazing. Don't you dare. We've built this town. We run this town. Some washed-up biker and his geriatric friends are not going to change them. But the FBI has nothing. Judge Merrick can make all the phone calls he wants. Without evidence, they can't touch me. Sterling wasn't so sure. What about the tunnel? What about the shipments? Shut down until this blows over. We go dark, keep our heads down, and in 3 months, when everyone's forgotten about this, we start back up. Garrett moved to his desk, sat down heavy. Right now, we focus on the hearing. Dalton testifies his friends back him up, and Thorne goes to prison. Once he's gone, once his land is ours, the rest will fall into place. And the girl, Rayne, what about her? She's talking to people, trying to find witnesses. Garrett waved a dismissive hand. Nobody will testify against us. They know better. But even as he said it, he wasn't sure, because downstairs outside 27 old men sat in silent judgment, and their presence changed the calculus. Fear was still a powerful tool, but shame, it turned out, was stronger. At 2 p.m., Rayne picked up the refurbished cassette player from Frank's shop. He'd done a beautiful job cleaning the heads, replacing the belt, getting it working like new. You want to test it? Frank asked. Not here, but thank you. She drove back to her apartment, set up the player on her kitchen table, and pressed play. The tape hissed for a moment. Then a voice came through, soft and warm and tired. Hi, baby. It's me, Lenora. If you're listening to this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I had to leave you. But I want you to know something. These 20 years with you were the best years of my life. You made me happy, Corbin. You made me believe in second chances. Rayne sat down listening. I know you think you're broken. I know you carry guilt about the things you did when you were young, the people you hurt, the life you lived. But baby, you're not that person anymore. You haven't been for a long time. You're kind. You're gentle. You're the man I fell in love with, the man I'm proud to call my husband." The voice paused and Rayne could hear breathing labored painful. "I'm making this tape because I know you, Corbin Thorne. I know you'll blame yourself for my death. You'll think you should have done more, seen it sooner, saved me somehow. But you can't save everyone, baby. Some things are just bigger than us." A long pause. "What you can do is keep living, keep being good, keep helping people, because that's who you are now. That's the man I know. And if you're listening to this, if you're in trouble, I want whoever hears this to know my husband is the strongest man I've ever met. Not because he can fight, but because he chose not to. He chose love over violence. He chose family over anger. He chose light over darkness every single day for 20 years. Rayne felt tears on her cheeks. If you're helping him, thank you. If you're judging him, please don't. He's earned his peace. He's earned his redemption. And if he stumbled, if he fell, if he made a mistake, remember that we all have. The measure of a man isn't his mistakes, it's what he does after." The tape hissed into silence. Rayne sat there for a long time, crying quietly in her kitchen, holding a piece of someone else's love story in her hands. Then she dried her eyes, rewound the tape, and made a decision. Tomorrow at the hearing, this tape would be heard. No matter what it took. Night fell over redemption. The bikers kept their vigil, rotating shifts, keeping watch. Inside the jail, Corbin lay on his bunk and stared at the ceiling. 12 hours until the hearing. Rhett came by at 10 p.m. off the clock out of uniform. He slipped into the cell block, nodded at Brennan, and sat down across from Corbin. "Hell of a thing," Rhett said, gesturing vaguely toward the front of the building. "The Brotherhood showing up like that. Kate always did have a flair for the dramatic. They're going to be there tomorrow. Front row. All of them." Corbin smiled faintly. "Good. Rayne came to see me today," Rhett continued. "She's got a witness, Jolene Briggs. And she's got something else, a tape. Your wife." Corbin's eyes closed. "She found it." "What's on it?" "The truth about who I am, who I was, who I'm trying to be." He opened his eyes. "It's evidence, Rhett. Character evidence. It might not be enough, but it's something." Merrick recused himself, filed an affidavit saying he witnessed the assault. The court's assigning a new judge. "Who? Don't know yet. Should find out in the morning." Corbin thought about that. A new judge could be good or bad. Could be someone honest or someone in Garrett's pocket. No way to know. "You ready for this?" Rhett asked. "I've been ready for 30 years. This is just the final exam." Rhett stood to leave, then paused. "Corbin, no matter what happens tomorrow, you did good. You saved that girl. You stood up when it mattered. Lenora would be proud." "I hope so." After Rhett left, Corbin tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind was too full. Memories and plans and hopes and fears all tangled together. He thought about Kuwait, about the moment the shrapnel hit his face, the burning pain, the certainty that he was going to die right there in the desert sand. He thought about the medic, barely more than a kid, stitching him up with shaking hands, saying, "You're lucky, you're lucky, you're lucky." He thought about coming home and realizing he didn't fit anymore. Didn't fit with the Hells Angels, didn't fit with civilian life, didn't fit anywhere. He thought about meeting Lenora, the way she looked at him, really looked at him and seen something worth saving. He thought about 18 years of marriage, of quiet mornings and hard work and simple happiness. He thought about her dying slowly, painfully, and the promise he'd made. No more violence. And he thought about last night, about seeing Rayne on that floor, seeing Dalton standing over her and knowing that he had a choice. Walk away, keep his promise, stay clean, or step in. Risk everything. Do what was right. He'd chosen right. Whatever happened tomorrow, he'd chosen right. And that was enough. In her apartment, Rayne packed a bag, the cassette tape carefully wrapped, the Zippo lighter, a notepad with Jolene Briggs's contact information. Corbin's leather jacket folded neatly. She set her alarm for 5 a.m. Then she lay down exhausted and fell into a dreamless sleep. Across town in the mayor's mansion, Garrett Ashford poured himself a scotch and stood at the window looking out at the lights of redemption. His town, his kingdom. One old man wasn't going to take that away. Tomorrow, Corbin Thorne would be convicted. The bikers would leave. Life would go back to normal. It had to. Because if it didn't, if this fell apart, if the FBI really did investigate, if the tunnel was discovered, if the decades of corruption came to light, Garrett drank his scotch and didn't let himself finish the thought. Everything would be fine. It always was. At the courthouse in the camping circle, Cade Brixton sat by a small fire and cleaned his bike's chrome with a soft cloth. Ritual? Meditation. Around him, his brothers did the same. Cleaning bikes, checking oil, tightening bolts. Preparing. Tomorrow wasn't going to be a fight, not with fists or weapons. Tomorrow was going to be a fight of presence, of standing witness, of making sure that when justice was decided, it was decided in full view of people who gave a damn. And if it went wrong, well, they were old, but they weren't dead yet, and some things were worth fighting for. The night deepened, stars wheeled overhead. The desert breathed its ancient breath, patient and eternal. And in a cell in the Redemption County Jail, Corbin Thorne finally slept. He dreamed of Lenora. She was young in the dream, healthy, smiling. They were in the garage, and she was handing him tools while he worked on a bike, and she was laughing at something he'd said, and everything was perfect. Then she faded, and he was alone with the bike and the work and the understanding that some things you can fix and some things you can't, but you keep working anyway. Because that's what mechanics do. That's what survivors do. That's what men do when they've made promises to the dead. He woke at dawn to the sound of Brennan opening his cell. "Time to go," the young guard said. "Hearing's at 9. They're transporting you over now." Corbin stood, stretched the stiffness out of his back, and followed Brennan out into the morning light. Through the windows, he could see the bikers already awake, already moving, already putting on their colors and their boots and their game faces. The brotherhood, his past, his present. Maybe if things went right, his future. The transport van waited outside. Corbin climbed in, hands cuffed in front of him, this time a small mercy. As they pulled away from the jail toward the courthouse, he saw them. 27 men standing at attention, hands over their hearts. A salute. A promise. "We're here, brother. We've got your back." Corbin nodded once, and then the van turned a corner and they were gone. But their presence remained, like an echo, like a drumbeat, like the engine rumble of 27 Harleys idling low and steady, waiting for the signal to roar. The Redemption County Courthouse was built in 1962, a monument to mid-century optimism and taxpayer dollars. 3 stories of beige concrete and narrow windows, it squatted on Main Street, like a bureaucratic toad inspiring neither confidence nor fear, just a vague sense of institutional weariness. By 8:30 a.m., the front steps were packed. News traveled fast in a small town, and this was the biggest thing to happen in Redemption since the tornado of 2003. Everyone wanted to see it. The mayor's son versus an old biker. Power versus justice. The way things were versus the way things should be. The bikers arrived first, 27 strong, moving in formation like they'd done it 1,000 times before, which they had. They took up positions on the courthouse steps, 2 lines forming an aisle, a gauntlet of leather and chrome and hard-earned years. People stared. People always stared. Cade Brixton stood at the top of the steps, arms crossed, face impassive. At 70, he was still an imposing figure. 6'4" shoulders like an ox, hands that looked like they could crush stone. His beard was white now, braided in the old style, and his eyes were pale gray, the color of winter skies. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. His presence was the message. We're here, we're watching. Do right by our brother or answer to us. At 8:45, Rayne arrived in her beat-up Honda, the cassette player, in a bag over her shoulder, Jolene Briggs in the passenger seat. Both women looked tired, strung out from too little sleep and too much coffee, but determined. They climbed the steps and the bikers parted for them, nodding respect. Cade stepped forward. "You're Rayne," he said, not a question. "Yes." "Corbin spoke highly of you, said you had spine. He saved my life. He's good at that." Cade glanced at the bag. "You got something in there that'll help." "I hope so." "Hope's good. Evidence is better. You got both." "We'll see." Cade smiled just a little. "Good answer. Go on in. Front row, left side. That's where his people sit." Rayne and Jolene entered the courthouse, footsteps echoing in the marble lobby. Everything smelled like floor wax and old justice, if justice had a smell. Up the stairs, 2nd floor, courtroom C. The room was already half full. Curious townspeople, reporters from the regional papers, a TV crew from Phoenix, looking for a story. And in the front row, right side, sat the Ashfords. Garrett in the center, 65 years old and groomed like a senator. Expensive suit, silk tie, hair, perfect. He looked like money and power, and the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Beside him, Dalton, cleaned up, sober, wearing a button-down and khakis like a college boy. His eyes found Rayne and he smirked. Just a little smirk, enough to say, "I won, you lost, get used to it." Rayne looked away before she did something stupid. She and Jolene sat down on the left side, front row. The cassette player sat on the bench between them, incongruous and anachronistic, a relic from another age. At 8:55, a side door opened, and Corbin was let in. He wore an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front, chain at his waist. But he walked with his head up, spine straight, and when his eyes found Rayne, he nodded once. "Thank you, I see you, I remember." They sat him at the defendant's table. His lawyer, Brennan Locke, sat beside him, young, nervous, out of his depth, a public defender who'd drawn the short straw and gotten the case nobody wanted. "Mr. Thorne," Brennan said, leaning in close, "I've reviewed the evidence, or lack thereof. I have to be honest with you, this doesn't look good." "I know. The prosecution has 5 witnesses. We have 1, maybe 2, if the judge allows certain testimony. And without that security footage—" "I understand, Brennan. Just do your best." The young lawyer nodded, swallowed hard, and shuffled his papers. At exactly 9 a.m., the bailiff stood. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Catherine Stedman presiding. Everyone stood, and through the door behind the bench came a woman who made Garrett Ashford's confident smile falter just for a second. Judge Catherine Stedman was 61 years old, 5'6", and built like a high school principal who'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed either time. She had steel gray hair, cut short, no makeup, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She wore her robes like armor. Rayne had never seen her before. Neither had most people in the room. But Garrett had. 20 years ago, Catherine Stedman had been a prosecutor in Phoenix. She'd gone after a fraud case involving a real estate developer with political connections. She'd lost. The developer walked. 6 months later, the same developer was arrested by the feds and did 15 years. Stedman had been right all along, just outgunned. She'd left prosecution after that, gone to the bench, spent 2 decades in county court, and earned a reputation. Fair but hard, smart but uncompromising. The kind of judge who didn't care who your father was. The court system had assigned her this morning emergency replacement for Merrick's recusal. Garrett didn't know if that was good luck or bad. Stedman sat, arranged her papers, and looked out over the courtroom with eyes that missed nothing. "Be seated," she said. Her voice was crisp, efficient. "This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of the state of Arizona versus Corbin Thorne. Mr. Thorne is charged with assault with a deadly weapon, brandishing a firearm, and terroristic threats. Prosecutor, are you ready to proceed?" The prosecutor stood. Marcus Vale, 52, slick hair, expensive suit. He worked for the county, but everyone knew he worked for Garrett. "Yes, Your Honor." Defense, Brennan stood shakily. "Yes, Your Honor." "Then let's begin. Prosecutor, call your first witness." Vale smiled. "The state calls Dalton Ashford." Dalton stood, walked to the witness stand, placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Then he sat down and started lying. "Mr. Ashford," Vale said, "please describe the events of the evening in question." Dalton leaned into the microphone, voice steady, rehearsed. "My friends and I stopped at Maggie's Diner around 11:30 p.m. We'd been riding wanted coffee. When we came in, the waitress, Rayne Holloway, seemed nervous. We ordered, and she said the kitchen was closed. And then we were disappointed, but we understood. We were getting ready to leave when Corbin Thorne came in. He immediately started yelling at us, accusing us of harassing the waitress. We tried to calm him down, but he was agitated, aggressive." Rayne's hands clenched. "Lies. Oh no, lies." "What happened next?" Vale prompted. "He pulled a gun, a Glock 19, pointed it at me and my friends, said we needed to leave his town, that he was tired of punks like us. We were terrified. I tried to talk him down, but he was out of control." "Did you see where he got the gun?" "From his waistband. He had it concealed." "And what did you do?" "I called 911, called my brother, Deputy Ashford, and we waited, hoping Thorne wouldn't shoot us." Vale nodded, satisfied. "No further questions, Your Honor." Judge Stedman looked at Brennan. "Cross-examination." Brennan stood, paper shaking slightly in his hands. "Mr. Ashford, you said my client pulled a gun. Did you see him enter the diner with a gun?" "No, but it was concealed." "Did anyone else see this gun before it was allegedly drawn?" "I don't know. You'd have to ask them." "I will. You also stated that you and your friends were simply trying to get coffee. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Had you been drinking that evening?" Dalton hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "I'd had a beer earlier, hours earlier." "1 beer's home. Maybe 2. Your friends, had they been drinking?" "Objection," Vale said, standing. "Relevance." Stedman looked at Brennan. "Counselor, Your Honor, the witness's credibility is at issue. If he and his friends were intoxicated, their recollection of events may be impaired." "I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mr. Ashford." Dalton shifted in his seat. Yes, they'd been drinking. We all had, but not much. We were fine. Fine, Brennan repeated. Yet you can't remember how many beers you had personally. It was two. I'm sure it was two. Brennan let that sit for a moment. Then, Mr. Ashford, when Miss Holloway refused to serve you, how did you react? I was disappointed but polite. You didn't raise your voice. No. You didn't touch her. No, absolutely not. You didn't at any point grab her apron or her clothing. No. Brennan walked back to the defense table, picked up a piece of paper. Your Honor, I'd like to submit as evidence a photograph taken by Ms. Holloway immediately after the incident showing damage to her uniform consistent with forceful tearing. Vale was on his feet. Objection, foundation, chain of custody. Stedman held out her hand. Let me see it. Brennan handed over the photo. Rayne had taken it in the bathroom at Maggie's right after. The torn skirt, the ripped seam clear as day. Stedman studied it. I'll allow it as evidence of Ms. Holloway's state after the incident. Continue, Mr. Locke. Thank you, Your Honor. Brennan turned back to Dalton. Mr. Ashford, if you didn't touch Ms. Holloway, how do you explain this damage to her clothing? I don't know. Maybe it was already torn. Maybe she did it herself for sympathy. A murmur ran through the courtroom. On the left side, Kate Brixton's jaw tightened. You're suggesting Ms. Holloway tore her own clothing to frame you. I'm saying I didn't do it. And the gun you claim my client pulled, where is it now? Dalton blinked. I don't know. You don't know. The police didn't recover a gun from Mr. Thorne, did they? He must have ditched it before they arrived. In the 5 minutes between when you called your brother and when he arrived, my client, a 68-year-old man, somehow hid a gun so well that a police search of the premises found nothing. Objection, Vale said. Speculation. Sustained. Move on, Mr. Locke. Brennan nodded. No further questions. Dalton stepped down looking less confident than when he'd started. Vale called his next witnesses. The four friends. One by one, they took the stand. One by one, they told the same story. Corbin had attacked them, threatened them, pulled a gun. But Brennan was ready now, finding his rhythm. He asked each one about their drinking, about how much, when, where. He asked about the gun, where it was, why no one had seen Corbin with it before he allegedly drew it. He asked about the torn uniform, about Rayne's demeanor, about timeline inconsistencies. And slowly, piece by piece, the story started to crack. One witness said Corbin pulled the gun from his jacket. Another said his waistband. A third couldn't remember. One said they'd had 3 beers. Another said 5. Their stories didn't match. By the time the fourth witness stepped down, even Vale was looking worried. Judge Stedman called a 15-minute recess. People stood stretched, whispered. The reporters scribbled notes. The TV crew filmed reaction shots. Rayne sat frozen hands on the cassette player. Kate appeared at her shoulder. You're doing good. Hang in there. It's not enough, is it, their testimony? Maybe not, but you got something else. Use it. When the time's right. He disappeared back into the crowd. Stedman returned. Prosecutor, any more witnesses? No, Your Honor, the state rests. Defense, you may call your witnesses. Brennan stood. The defense calls Rayne Holloway. Rayne's heart hammered as she walked to the stand. She swore the oath, sat down, tried to breathe. Brennan's voice was gentler with her. Ms. Holloway, please tell the court what happened on the night in question. And she did. All of it. The harassment, the grabbing, the torn skirt, Corbin stepping in calm and protective, Dalton pulling the gun first, Corbin disarming him. The truth. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Then Vale stood for cross-examination. Ostoy, Holloway, you're friends with the defendant, correct? I know him. He's a regular at the diner. Would you say you have a relationship? He's kind to me. We talk sometimes. So you have a personal interest in seeing him acquitted. I have an interest in the truth. Vale smiled, patronizing. The truth as you see it. But Ms. Holloway, you were emotional that night. Upset. Is it possible your recollection is colored by that emotion? No, I know what I saw. You say Mr. Ashford grabbed you, but is it possible there was simply a misunderstanding? Perhaps he reached for something, you pulled away, and your uniform caught on something. That's not what happened. But you can't be certain. You were scared, you said so yourself. Fear distorts memory. I know exactly what happened. Vale shrugged. No further questions. Rayne stepped down, shaking with anger and frustration. Brennan called his next witness. The defense calls Jolene Briggs. Jolene took the stand, nervous but determined. She confirmed Rayne's story, saw the harassment, saw the torn skirt, saw Corbin defend Rayne, saw Dalton pull the gun. Vale tried to discredit her too, suggested she was mistaken, confused, lying to help Rayne, but Jolene held firm. I know what I saw, and I'm tired of watching people get away with things because they've got money and power. The courtroom stirred. Garrett's face darkened. Brennan had one more card to play. Your Honor, the defense would like to submit audio evidence. A recording made by Lenora Thorne, the defendant's late wife, prior to her death in 2011. It speaks to Mr. Thorne's character. Vale objected immediately. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Character evidence in the form of a recording made 13 years ago by a deceased person is hearsay and inadmissible. Stedman considered. Mr. Locke, on what grounds are you submitting this? Character evidence, Your Honor. The prosecution has painted my client as a violent, dangerous man. This recording provides context for who he really is. It's a dying declaration which makes it admissible under... It's not a dying declaration about this case, Vale interrupted. It's irrelevant. Stedman removed her glasses, cleaned them slowly. The courtroom held its breath. I'm going to allow it, she said finally. This is a preliminary hearing, not a trial. The standards are different. I want to hear it, but Mr. Locke, it had better be relevant. It is Your Honor, thank you. Rayne brought the cassette player forward, set it on the evidence table. Her hands shook as she pressed play. The tape hissed, then Lenora's voice filled the courtroom. Hi, baby, it's me. Soft, tired, but warm, so warm. If you're listening to this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I had to leave you. In the defendant's chair, Corbin closed his eyes, but I want you to know something. These 20 years with you were the best years of my life. You made me happy, Corbin. You made me believe in second chances. Around the courtroom, people leaned forward, listening. I know you think you're broken. I know you carry guilt about the things you did when you were young, the people you hurt, the life you lived. But baby, you're not that person anymore. You haven't been for a long time. You're kind, you're gentle. You're the man I fell in love with. Rayne saw movement from the back. The bikers had come inside, standing along the rear wall. Every one of them with their hands clasped in front, heads bowed, paying respect. I'm making this tape because I know you, Corbin Thorne. I know you'll blame yourself for my death. You'll think you should have done more, but you can't save everyone. Some things are bigger than us. Lenora's breathing grew labored. You could hear the sickness, the pain. What you can do is keep living. Keep being good. Keep helping people. That's who you are now. And if you're listening to this, if you're in trouble, I want whoever hears this to know, my husband is the strongest man I've ever met. Not because he can fight, but because he chose not to. He chose love over violence every single day for 20 years. Someone in the gallery was crying softly. If you're helping him, thank you. If you're judging him, please don't. He's earned his peace. He's earned his redemption. The measure of a man isn't his mistakes, it's what he does after. The tape hissed into silence. Nobody moved. Judge Stedman sat very still, looking at Corbin with an expression that was hard to read. Then she cleared her throat. Thank you, Miss Holloway. You may return to your seat. Rayne took the cassette player and sat down. Tears streamed down her face. Stedman looked at both lawyers. Anything else? Your Honor. Brennan said, standing, I'd like to call one more witness. Sheriff Everett Colburn. Vale started to object, then stopped. Rhett was already walking to the stand. He was sworn in, sat down. Sheriff Colburn, Brennan said, how long have you known Corbin Thorne? 42 years. And in that time, have you ever known him to be violent without cause? No, Corbin's the most peaceful man I know, has been for over a decade. Can you speak to his character? Rhett looked at Corbin, then at the judge. Corbin saved my life 3 times. Once in a bar fight when we were young and stupid. Once when I was struggling with addiction and he drove me to rehab, stayed with me for a week to make sure I didn't bolt. And once when I was applying for this job and he vouched for me even though he knew it might make his own life harder. Why would vouching for you make his life harder? Because he knew I'd have to enforce laws he might not agree with. That I might have to arrest people he cared about. But he did it anyway because he believed I'd be a good sheriff and this town needed one. Rhett's voice grew stronger. Corbin Thorne is not a violent man. He's a protector. There's a difference. And what happened that night at Maggie's? That was protection, not aggression. Vale stood for cross. Sheriff, you're biased. You just admitted you owe Mr. Thorne your career. I owe him my life. That doesn't make me a liar. But it makes you unreliable as a witness. No, Rhett said firmly. It makes me someone who knows the defendant well enough to speak to his true character, which is more than you can say. Stedman's eyebrow went up. That's enough, gentlemen. Sheriff Colburn, you may step down. Rhett returned to his seat in the gallery. Anything else, Mr. Locke? Brennan hesitated. Then actually, Your Honor, yes, I have one piece of physical evidence I've just become aware of. He walked to the defense table, picked up something small, walked it to the bench. It was the ammunition magazine from Dalton's gun, the one Corbin had pocketed. This is the magazine from the firearm Mr. Ashford claims my client pulled on him. Mr. Thorne removed it during the altercation for safety purposes. If Mr. Thorne had been the aggressor, if he had pulled a gun, as Mr. Ashford claims, why would he have disarmed it and kept the magazine? Vale was on his feet. Objection. Where did that come from? Chain of custody is completely broken. It came from my pocket, Corbin said, speaking for the first time. His voice carried across the courtroom. Deputy Ashford didn't search me thoroughly. I kept it as evidence. Stedman held up the magazine, examined it. Mr. Vale, I find it interesting that if the defendant had truly pulled a gun on the alleged victims, the police report makes no mention of recovering one. Yet here we have a magazine for a Glock 19, the same weapon Mr. Ashford admits to owning. And the defendant could have planted that. Or, Stedman said quietly, Mr. Ashford could be lying about who pulled the gun first. The courtroom erupted. Garrett was on his feet. Reporters shouted questions. The bailiff called for order. Stedman banged her gavel. Order, I will have order. Silence fell, reluctant and charged. Stedman looked at both lawyers. I've heard enough. I'm going to take a 30-minute recess to review the evidence and testimony. When I return, I'll give my ruling. Court is adjourned. She stood and left the bench. Everyone started talking at once. Rayne grabbed Corbin's hand through the gap in the railing. You kept the magazine. You planned this. Insurance, Corbin said quietly. Always have insurance. Brennan was grinning, the first real smile of the day. That was brilliant. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have worried about chain of custody and admissibility. Better to surprise everyone. Across the aisle, Garrett was in deep conversation with Vale, his face red with anger. Dalton sat slumped, staring at his hands. The 30 minutes felt like hours. Rayne paced outside the courtroom. The bikers stood in their silent vigil. Rhett smoked a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years. Then the bailiff called them back. Judge Stedman returned to the bench, her face unreadable. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony presented today, she began. This court's job in a preliminary hearing is to determine whether there is probable cause to believe the defendant committed the crimes charged. She paused, looked directly at Corbin. In this case, I find the prosecution's witnesses unreliable. Their testimony was inconsistent, contradicted by physical evidence, and undermined by their own admissions of intoxication. The defense witnesses, by contrast, were credible and consistent. Garrett's hands clenched the armrest. Furthermore, the physical evidence supports the defendant's version of events. The torn uniform, the ammunition magazine, the absence of any weapon recovered from Mr. Thorne. Stedman removed her glasses. I find that there is no probable cause to believe Corbin Thorne committed assault, brandishing, or terroristic threats. The charges are dismissed. The gavel came down. The courtroom exploded. The bikers roared approval. Rayne burst into tears. Brennan pumped his fist. Rhett closed his eyes in relief. And Corbin just sat there, hands still cuffed, and breathed. Free. Furthermore, Stedman continued, raising her voice over the noise, I am troubled by what I've heard today. I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of possible perjury by the prosecution's witnesses. I am also referring certain allegations to the FBI for their review. Garrett stood. Your Honor, this is... Sit down, Mr. Ashford. You're not on trial. Yet. Stedman looked at the bailiff. Release Mr. Thorne from custody immediately. They unlocked the cuffs. Corbin stood, rubbing his wrist. Rayne ran to him, threw her arms around him. He held her, awkward, paternal. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for everything. You saved me, kid. Not the other way around. The bikers filed in, surrounding Corbin. Cade clapped him on the shoulder, hard enough to hurt. Told you we'd be here. Never doubted it. Across the room, Garrett was leaving Dalton and Vale following. His empire wasn't crumbling yet, but the first cracks had appeared. And sometimes that's all it takes. Judge Stedman gathered her papers, looked once more at Corbin. Their eyes met. She nodded just slightly. Justice for once had been served. But it wasn't over. Not quite. Outside the courthouse, the press descended. Cameras, microphones, questions shouted from every direction. Corbin pushed through them, silent Cade and the bikers forming a protective barrier. They made it to the bikes. Corbin's Harley was there, brought by Rhett from the impound. He swung his leg over the settled into the familiar seat, gripped the handlebars. Home. Where you headed? Kate asked. Shop. I got work backed up. Just like that, back to normal. Corbin smiled. What else is there? Kate laughed, shook his head. You're a hell of a man, Ironside. So are you, Warhammer. Thank you, all of you. Couldn't have done this without the brotherhood. That's what brotherhood means. We show up. They mounted their bikes' 27 engines, firing up in sequence a symphony of chrome and combustion. And then they rode. Down Main Street past the storefronts and the sidewalks where people stopped to watch. Past the mayor's office where Garrett stood at the window watching his kingdom shift beneath his feet. Past Maggie's diner where Pete stood in the doorway waving. Out onto Route 66 where the desert opened up and the sky stretched forever. The pack rode together for 20 miles, then began to peel off. Nevada, New Mexico, California, back to their lives, their shops, their quiet corners of the world. Until the next time, because there would be a next time. There always was. Cade was the last to go, pulling alongside Corbin at a crossroads. You need anything, you call. I will. I mean it, Corbin, anything. I know. Thank you, brother. They gripped forearms the old way, the way they'd done 40 years ago. Then Cade turned north and Corbin continued east. Alone again. But not lonely. 3 months later, winter settled over redemption like a cold prayer. Garrett Ashford was arrested by the FBI on 14 counts of drug trafficking, money laundering, and corruption. The tunnel beneath Corbin's property was excavated, mapped, closed. Evidence of decades of criminal activity came pouring out. Dalton Ashford was sentenced to 5 years in state prison for assault and perjury. His friends got 3 years each. Sterling Ashford resigned from the sheriff's department, moved to Nevada, and was never heard from again. Judge Merrick officiated the trial. It was his last case before retirement. He presided with fierce, uncompromising fairness. Rhett Colburn was elected mayor in a special election. His first act was to install new water pipes on the south side. His second was to fix that pothole on 5th Street. A redemption began to change, slowly, the way all real change happens, one decision at a time. On a cold Saturday in December, Corbin stood in Ironside Forge and Customs working on a custom build for a client in Tucson. The radio played old country Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson songs about redemption and second chances. The door opened. Rayne came in carrying a paper bag. Lunch, she said. Figured you'd forget to eat. I was getting to it. Sure you were. She set the bag on his workbench, pulled out sandwiches. How's the build coming? Good. Should be done by Tuesday. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only comes from real friendship. I got accepted, Rayne said finally. Accepted to community college, business management. I'm going to learn how to run a restaurant properly. Maybe open my own place someday. Ah, Corbin smiled, genuine pride in his eyes. That's fantastic, Rayne. Really. Couldn't have done it without you. You showed me I was worth more than I thought. You always were. You just needed reminding. She finished her sandwich, crumpled the wrapper. You know what Lenora said on that tape about you choosing love over violence? Yeah. She was right, and it matters. What you did, how you handled it, it changed things. Changed me. Changed this whole town, really. Town changed itself. I just didn't make it worse. Rayne laughed. That's very Corbin of you. Can't even take a compliment. Never been good at it. She stood to leave, paused at the door. There's a Christmas thing at Maggie's next week. Pete's hosting. You should come. Maybe. I'm not asking, I'm telling. Be there. Yes, ma'am. After she left, Corbin went back to work. The wrench felt good in his hand, familiar. The bike was taking shape piece by piece, system by system. Like everything else worth doing, it required patience, care, attention to detail, and the understanding that some things you can fix and some things you can't, but you keep working anyway, because that's what mechanics do. That's what survivors do. That's what men do when they've made promises to the dead and the living. Both, the radio played on. The winter sun slanted through the windows. The bike gleamed under his hands. And Corbin Thorne, 68 years old, former Hell's Angel, former soldier, a lot of things worked until the light faded. Then he locked up the shop, climbed on his Harley, and rode home through the desert darkness. Free, forgiven. And finally, after all these years, at peace. In a small house on the edge of town, Judge Merrick sat in his armchair, looking at the photograph of Constance. I did it, he said quietly to the picture. I stood up, like I should have done for you. Then the photograph didn't answer. But in the silence, in the peace of his living room, he felt something ease in his chest, something he'd carried for 15 years. Guilt letting go. In the mayor's office, now occupied by Rhett Colburn, a phone rang. Mayor Colburn. Red, it's fine. This is Agent Morrison, FBI. Wanted to give you an update on the Ashford case. Go ahead. We've uncovered evidence linking Garrett to operations in 3 states. This is bigger than we thought. He's not getting out. Ever. Rhett leaned back in his chair. Good. This town deserves better. It does. And from what I hear, it's got it now. Good luck, Mayor. Thanks. Rhett hung up, looked out the window at Main Street, at the town he'd sworn to serve and protect. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was better, and better was enough. In a women's correctional facility in Phoenix, in a visitor's room, a woman sat across from Rayne Holloway. The woman was 40 years old, hard miles showing on her face. She'd been arrested with Garrett, a bookkeeper, who'd kept the records, who'd known everything. Why did you come? The woman asked. Because you testified. You told the truth even though it meant prison. That took courage. Or stupidity. No, courage. Rayne slid a piece of paper across the table. When you get out, if you need a job, call this number. It's mine. I'm opening a restaurant. I could use someone who knows numbers. The woman stared at the paper. Why would you help me? Because someone helped me, and I'm passing it on. The woman's eyes filled. She took the paper, clutched it like a lifeline. Thank you. Thank you for doing the right thing. And in a federal prison in Colorado, Garrett Ashford sat in a cell and thought about power. He'd had it for 30 years, wielded it like a weapon, built an empire on fear and money and the certainty that rules didn't apply to him. All of it gone, taken by an old man with a motorcycle and a promise to a dead wife. Garrett didn't understand it, didn't understand how Corbin had won, didn't understand how the system he'd controlled for decades had turned on him. But in the dark of the cell, in the silence of federal custody, he had plenty of time to think about it. And no answers came, only the slow grinding truth that empires fall. Always, eventually, inevitably. Christmas came to redemption with snow rare and beautiful. The party at Maggie's was crowded, warm, full of laughter and food and the kind of community that comes from surviving something together. Corbin sat in his usual booth, coffee black, watching people. Rayne moved through the crowd, hosting, smiling. Rhett told stories about his first weeks as mayor. Jolene Briggs introduced her daughter to Judge Merrick, who smiled and shook the girl's hand with grandfatherly kindness. Even Pete had come around, apologizing to Corbin for not standing up that night for hiding. I was scared, Pete had said. I know, most people are. But you weren't. Oh, I was terrified. I just didn't let it stop me. Now in the booth nursing his coffee, Corbin felt something he hadn't felt in 13 years. Contentment. Not happiness, exactly. He'd never be happy the way he was with Lenora. That kind of joy was gone. But contentment, peace, the knowledge that he'd done right, kept his promises, and somehow made it through. His phone buzzed, a text from Cade. Merry Christmas, brother. Roads are calling. Might swing by Arizona in the spring. Corbin smiled, texted back. Doors always open. He put the phone away, drank his coffee, and watched the snow fall outside the window. 70 years old in a few months. A lifetime behind him. However much time left ahead. And every day, every single day, a choice. Violence or kindness, anger or peace. The man he used to be or the man he'd become. Corbin chose. The same way he'd chosen every day for 13 years. The same way he'd choose tomorrow. And all the tomorrows after that. Until the road ran out. Until the engine stopped. Until the final mile was ridden and the last wrench set down and the work at last was done. But not today. Today there was coffee, there was snow, there was community, there was Rayne catching his eye across the room, mouthing thank you one more time. There was life. And life, Corbin had learned, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.